This episode is brought to you by Cisco, your partner in AI-guided cybersecurity. Cisco XDR improves your security efficacy and lets you do more with less. It detects advanced threats faster, automates responses, and prioritizes your most critical security alerts. Learn more at www.shi.com/Cisco.
10 or 15 years ago, from getting 10 alerts a day on a busy day, or even 50 when they were being attacked, to thousands of events a day, even in a smaller environment, it means I can't look at every single event. I need to have something putting that information together for me.
In the world of technology, heroes are everywhere. They're overcoming disruption, delivering sustainable outcomes, and fearlessly forging the future to solve what's next. Join me, Ed McNamara, as we meet the people and businesses driving change in our constantly disruptive world. This is Innovation Heroes, a podcast brought to you by SHI. The cybersecurity threat landscape is changing. Bad actors are getting more sophisticated, and an ever-increasing number of businesses are encountering attacks. If you've been in the IT business for a while, and especially if you've been in the marketing of IT business for a while, you've always heard that the threat landscape is constantly changing. Attacks are increasing, and those 2 points are hammered home since your first day on the job. Aren't bad actors always getting more sophisticated? Aren't attacks always increasing? The honest answer is yes, they are, except it might be worse than you think. Between 2021 and 2023, data breaches rose by 72%, and studies indicate that over 60% of businesses experience a cyber incident each year. From ransomware to phishing schemes and IoT attacks, companies across all sectors are being targeted, making it difficult to rethink how we protect our digital infrastructure. Luckily, there are heroes of innovation helping us fight back. Brianna Farro, Cisco Security's Director of XDR Product Management, is on the front line of the fight against cyber threats. Briana and her team at Cisco are arming customers with an AI-infused security system to deliver end-to-end threat management, break down silos between different security systems, and provide a unified, automated, and efficient approach to combating evolving cyber threats. It's called Extended Detection Response, or XDR for short. Briana, welcome to Innovation Heroes.
Thank you so much for having me, Ed. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So I guess we'll just start with the background. How did you get into cybersecurity? Was there a moment that set you on this path?
Yeah, so it's a little bit twofold. I'll go back even a little bit further to just briefly talk about how I got into information technology before even cybersecurity. My path to information technology actually starts with the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer in the 90s. And it's all because I decided that I needed to have my own website for that TV show. And I got into web development and those types of things. And from that, I got really interested in information technology. I think, to your point, the real turning point for me around cybersecurity was starting to think through and realize that the more we did digitally, the more we were at risk. And we can't turn around and not live our lives digitally. It does provide so many benefits. There's probably some downside to how much we look at our phones and needing to break away from that. But I was one of the first people to use online purchasing of services and delivery. But the more we looked through that, even before the first breaches happened, we really just started to think through the negative aspects of that. And really, for me, where it hit home is thinking through the much, much darker side of the internet, where people traffic humans and do a lot of really bad things, and how much I could be a part of helping to stop that as much as possible.
Historically speaking, what have been the building blocks of an effective cybersecurity program?
Cybersecurity solutions need to be based on a concept of knowing what is at most risk. And as we've gone through the years, it's really difficult to think through, do I know what's at most risk to my organization? Do I even have a good understanding of what all of the assets that are in my environment are? And really, if you think about it back to our personal lives, do you know every single item that's in your junk drawer in your house, assuming that you have one? Probably not.
No.
Right? Probably not. But realistically, there's some stuff in there that you need. We may call it a junk drawer, but it's there for a reason. You put it in there versus throwing it out and making it easily accessible, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah, so when we think through that, we may have assets that are critical to doing things in our organization and in our delivery of business that we don't even know are there. And so we need to be able to have a way to defend against those, even if we can't 100% identify them. So that's knowing kind of what's at risk to us, or what's at risk if we lose things like data or lose things like access to our environments and our systems. And to put it really simply, in a lot of these situations, that could be genuinely the difference between somebody getting a life-saving surgery in a day and
Right.
not. And I don't say that to be dramatic, but if you think about it applied to real life, if a ransomware attack takes a health organization down and all of the systems that are not only used to process that patient, but in a lot of situations, we have regulated medical devices that are used as part of surgeries or to keep people alive and functional after those surgeries. And if those get infected and they can't be used, you literally could be making the difference between saving a life or not. So the program needs to think about what's most at risk to it, where are you most exposed, what controls you have in place to deal with that, and then how you continue to assess those things at a real bare bones aspect of it.
Yeah, and I don't think you're being dramatic at all, and especially with your work history. I mean, you spent 8 years working for the City of New York Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications. You know, we've got a good-sized public sector audience. I mean, you don't get to take a day off, an hour off, right? I mean, it's really true. I mean, do you ever look back with any nostalgia on being in the public sector and with the protecting the people's information?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
again, not like genuinely and seriously. When you think about, so I'm a lifelong New Yorker. And one of the interesting things in working for your city, in your city, is you become both a receiver of those services and a provider of them at the exact same
Right.
time. Jokingly, like you're actually kind of paying your own salary hysterically, right,
Yeah.
through tax money. But
Right.
you really start to appreciate that those services are real and they're used, right? Trains not moving. I mean, that's always a huge piece of it too, because if it's what you depend on to get places, and again, you're the doctor who has to perform the life-saving surgery and
Exactly.
you're stuck on a train underground, that's a real problem if a signal went down.
Absolutely. In terms of threat landscape, what was once an effective security program might become obsolete. I kind of kid my marketing colleagues who talk about how the threat landscape is always changing. But I mean, you're at Cisco 2+ years now. Like, how is it different today than it was 5 years ago? Whether it's the landscape, whether it's Cisco's response to it, what are the changes that you see because you're on the front lines?
One of the things that I would say is, even as a practitioner, so when I was still on the customer side of the fence, for example, we didn't have service desks when I first started. We had help desks, and it was because of the difference of the transformation of what you provided as part of that offering. So on the digital and cybersecurity side, it's very similar. Even simple things, you didn't say cybersecurity; it was information technology or information technology security, and you were really looking at protecting a perimeter that was defined and stationary. You had locations, you had a finite number of physical locations, even if you were a very distributed environment. And then you would put physical appliances in
Right.
place to defend those environments, like firewalls, and then progressing to identity intrusion detection systems, and then intrusion prevention systems when somebody thought through the fact that, like a firewall, it might be a good idea to just block something from happening versus monitoring it. So there's been a huge transformation. We use that term attack surface, Ed, but I hate to say it, it's true. It just grows. It just grows and grows and grows. And that is a massive difference, including the fact that you changed from having people who were always stationed at a desk and systems that were chained and locked to desks that prevented physical theft, to sometimes we don't even have systems anymore. There's applications that we run on that are based on what we call serverless systems. And a lot of times there's a whole new way to attack those types of systems because there's no operating system. There's nothing to hack from that format. So you have to think through getting into that system in a different way. And one kind of last thought around this is, as we continue to transform constantly with things like AI and artificial intelligence, everybody loves the chatbot style models that are coming up, or even the opportunity to ask your phone a question without having to type or put some sort of information in to obtain an answer. But that is in and of itself a whole nother risk surface that now needs not just defending, but also needs in research into to understand how we could leverage it to go against the bad actors. And then I think the last thing I would say is there's been an interesting shift in what people are looking to do when they attack you. It used to be maybe cause some disruption and damage. Maybe there were hacktivists that were literally trying to do that for a reason. And there were always like digital and cyber criminals trying to get at some sort of information. Now, though, they may
Right.
want to take your data as a starting point. That data that they're going to take from you is going to be to set up an identity for your children that they don't even know exists, to open up bank accounts and apply for mortgages and do all sorts of things that are going to be a huge problem for your child later that you may not even realize, because you're not monitoring credit on your child, because they shouldn't have any until they're 18, at least in the US. So that's been a big shift as well, as like the intention of what criminals and threat actors are going after, especially when we talk about things like nation states and politics. As we all know, that's really come into play into trying to sway things either way, or to try to do damage on both a social and a digital level to different entities.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you speak to that, because you look at, the crime that makes the news, like the smash and grab or something like that. Like, it happened right then and there. Like, there's no denying that somebody came in and took your jewelry or took your phone out of your store. It's that'll, like, when you say how the bad actors, behave, it's that slow burn that it's like, what were we hacked? Like, what did they take? Like, when did that happen? That's the one that really gets me. That's like just another level of criminality there, when you're just like, yeah, we don't have to act on this right away. Like, we can stay in here for as long as we need to get what we, that seems different to me. Would you agree with that?
I would. I would say that digital security is really interesting, and digital crime is really interesting when you compare it to physical crime and
Yep.
a traditional, detective and police force, because there's a lot of similarities. We might have an undercover person infiltrate an environment and sit there to gain trust and try to gain more information about a organization, a country, et cetera. So the digital situation that you just described is very similar to that. It's kind of like the digital version of the old tricks that we start to put into play. But
Right.
because the digital footprint is so much more vast sometimes than what the physical footprint could ever be, it does take on its own new animal, for lack of a better term.
Absolutely. So to deal with this changing landscape, to deal with the changing animal, one of the innovations is XDR, extended detection response. Can you go into how is this developed? Like, how does it work? What's the purpose? That you and your team are using XDR to support.
Yes. When we think about situations, again, kind of masking it or mapping it, to our own in-person lives, if I came home, for example, and I saw that my door it wasn't in the lock, it was kind of adjacent, I would
Right.
think that was weird. We talked about it I live in New York. I would lock everything. So that would be very,
Always.
very weird, right?
Right.
However, if I opened the door, there would be a very different next response for me if I found things knocked over and it looked like something had been ransacked or rummaged through, or I walked in and I didn't see anything going on. If I saw people in my house there or not, and whether or not I knew those people, if I saw my TV gone, these would be different indicators that would help me understand what had happened. Maybe I did somehow leave for the day and failed to close my door. Once I left my window open on a New York City street, parked for an entire weekend, and somehow got nothing stolen out of my car. So stranger things have occurred. But,
They thought it was a trap. Absolutely.
I said the same thing. I was like, somebody's like, I'm not touching that car. I'm not going anywhere near it. But, things do happen and it's possible. But if I walked in and I saw other indicators that let me understand that something likely had happened, I would then start to take action, like call the cops and other things. So when we take that to the digital aspect, it's really very similar. We want the extended detection and response means I don't want to focus just on endpoint or EDR detection and response, or network or NDR detection and response, or email security solutions, or identity. It's the whole package. In order to really understand what's happening in an environment, an organization needs to have visibility into all of those things. And the visibility is more critical than ever when we have so many solutions that our users can self-service off of, including things like AI, where they could take in a totally non-malicious intended way, take my data from inside my organization, plop it in ChatGPT to get a summarization to make the best report and presentation they could, but not realize that they just leaked a lot of information. So the visibility is really important there, and helping an organization that went maybe 10 or 15 years ago from getting 10 alerts a day on a busy day, or even 50 when they were being attacked, to thousands of events a day, even in a smaller environment. It means I can't look at every single event. I need to have something putting that information together for me. So I have the visibility. Now put that information together for me. Don't forget about certain aspects. Most organizations have endpoint detection and response, but it's more expensive and it's harder to deploy things like network detection. So don't lose that. Build that in. Let me have the visibility across all of those things so that I can understand what's happening in my environment. And then, very similar to a human central nervous system, I want those sensors, my fingers, my toes, my nose, my mouth, to help me understand what I'm absorbing, but I need my brain, I need analytics to process what happened. Having no TV in my house, a person knocked over, my door open, and a broken window doesn't necessarily indicate that I was robbed and I have an injured family member in my house, unless I know that that's what all of those things mean together. So really, organizations need to have that visibility and that correlation and comprehensiveness to help them understand what happened in their environment, and then guide them to a response is really what we're goaled at. Because if I called you and said, you need to come by our neighborhood right away, you'd have a super different response. If I said, well, I had a surprise birthday party planned for you, Ed, and I forgot to tell you, you might be like,
Right.
That sounds like a you problem. I'm recording a podcast right now, but I'll see what I can. But if I said the house was robbed or it's on fire, you're either going to say, you're calling the wrong person, or like, why are you calling me first? Very different responses based on that. So the guidance of how to respond so that you can quickly minimize the impact to your environment and your organization is also something that organizations need to start transforming too.
And you touched on it a little bit, and there's one thing that I want to quote back to you. You said in a recent blog post that allowing security operations centers teams to move away from the endless investigation and instead spend their time remediating the most critical incidents across their security stack quickly and efficiently was a big priority. And then in another post, you said that you mentioned streamlining the process in the security operations center. So I love the consistency that you have. I mean, your response to these. I mean, we always talk about the evolving threats, but then the increasing aspect of these threats, or the number of threats that are facing. You've got to make the security operations center more efficient and increase their bandwidth, right?
Yes, and I love you brought up kind of the prioritization aspect that you've seen me quote in the past. That's a key point about that. We talked about knowing what's most impactful to your environment just a few minutes ago. In reality, when I worked for the city, I would have 5 Sev1s come in at a time. And I remember I used to tell a manager of mine, well, you just handed me 5 Sev1s. So guess who's going to decide what priority order these work in? Because they're all at the same severity, right? I'm going to do some sort of additional triaging and assessment and figure that out. But if we can, but if we can use an understanding of the attack that we think is happening in the organization and what's most important to Ed, like what out of that junk drawer would Ed open the drawer to grab if there was a fire in his place on the way out, and hopefully get out A-okay with that. We want to know that so that we can start to put that information together and not only tell you what happened, but help you stop the bleed or stop what's happening on those systems and protect those most critical systems. So that prioritization is really important, because how are you supposed to work on something with priority if you don't know a difference between 5 different events that are happening in your environment?
In today's complex threat landscape, security teams are stretched thin. They spend too much time on repetitive tasks and struggle to prioritize alerts. Our network-led, open extended detection and response solution provides a single, unified view of your security posture. We correlate data from multiple sources to pinpoint the most critical threats. Cisco XDR's built-in automation and AI-guided remediation save you valuable time and resources. Organizations using XDR have a 54% improvement in advanced threat detection, a 48% increase in a Tier 1 analyst throughput, and a significant boost in team collaboration. Cisco XDR integrates with the broader Cisco security portfolio and key third-party security tools, making it the most comprehensive and flexible solution on the market today. Stop reaching, start anticipating. Visit www.shi.com/Cisco to learn how Cisco XDR can empower your security team.
What can XDR do that older cybersecurities that came before it can't? And like kind of what are a few of the big ways that XDR is positively impacting security outcomes for users that you're talking to today?
There's a couple of things that, at least if you're looking at an XDR solution, whether it's Cisco's or not, we feel is really critically important for people. So bringing in context from multiple sources. There's XDRs that have been built at different times and coming from different places, and they may be really great at interpreting a certain source, like an endpoint component or a network component, but they may not be good at interpreting both of those or more of those, like identity and email security and collaboration tools and cloud-based detection, audit logs, identity logs, et cetera. There's a need to understand, and first of all, to have visibility into all of those, but then to understand those. One of the things that allows us at Cisco to be able to do that is we have happened to be fortunate enough to have solutions in our portfolio for all of those things by themselves. So our ability to have an understanding of where that piece of information, the TV being gone compared to the window being broken, compared to the lock being open, for example, the ability to understand that is important in understanding its relevance. So definitely we would guide people to look at solutions that provide that true extension, not just in what data they might pull in for you, but in the usage of that data. And then Brianna's favorite word that my team would tell you, they're probably tired of hearing, but Brianna's favorite word is correlation. We really do, and I really do believe, if you literally even just look up the dictionary definition of aggregation versus correlation, it's a big difference to say that Ed and Brianna recorded a podcast in October compared to saying that this Ed and this Brianna recorded this podcast on this date. And that is the difference between correlating and getting a definitive answer of what happened on what day versus a bunch of data that could be useful. And I could certainly go through it to understand that. But if we go back to the point you made earlier of getting me to what I need the fastest to then allow me to action the fastest and then minimize the impact or any impact in theory to my environment, if possible, I really need correlation. So we feel that as organizations are looking to potentially make this transformation and leverage a solution like extended detection and response, that those are some key components. The last one is that responsive action. Too often, even as a practitioner in the industry, I've seen the R kind of fall off in any detection and response. It's like, hey, I told you what happened, so you go handle it, right? It's kind of like if you've ever gotten your car towed in New York. I don't know if you've ever had that benefit, but you park somewhere that you didn't realize you weren't supposed to, you get towed and you're like, cool, so my car's gone, but it's not like they leave a little marker in the waiting area telling you that.
Our audience always loves like real world case studies. Like, do you have a good one like at the ready for, that to really just kind of illuminate what you're describing here?
Yeah, so there were a couple of pretty significant breaches that had happened earlier in the year for certain healthcare organizations, providers, insurance companies, et cetera. And we had a few, without, obviously naming names, but we had a few customers who said, wow, because we had certain things set up in XDR, looking for this type of scenario, looking for this type of outcome, plus the native capabilities that are built in, we were able to avoid this entirely. And that's huge because especially in situations where you mentioned it earlier, it's very clear what happened. There's a huge data breach, like the impact is there. There's all of that trickle impact that happens from that. When your social security number is stolen, day one, maybe nothing happens, but what happens 6 months later? If you're a company that has that data breach happen, there's also all sorts of legal ramifications and liabilities that come in. It was, I think, a combination of validation of the solution and the model of the solution to look through the entire environment, have visibility, understand and process what's happening, but also a sigh of relief for those organizations that when they looked at this model, this transformational model of having that broad visibility and that analytics and correlation, that they saw it be effective. So that was a huge thing for some recent organizations. The other thing also that we have recognized and noticed is organizations have spent a lot of time in the solutions that they're purchasing, and they have already implemented those. They have a knowledge base that's built up on those. So it's unrealistic to expect any organization to just transform and go all in on one vendor just to purchase an extended detection and response solution. The other thing that we feel organizations should be mindful of is an open and hybrid model, where the delivery vendor is definitely taking on an aspect of the development for the integration with those third parties, but an organization at least has the opportunity to bring, in our case, a non-Cisco EDR, a non-Cisco NDR, a non-Cisco email security solution, and or the flexibility to create custom detections or integrations, at least with those solutions. So we would definitely encourage people to keep an eye out for that as a requirement.
I think that the rebranding of Cisco as a security company has been just really something for the textbooks that I think marketing should be teaching, actually. But IT people don't buy because of marketing. They buy because there's really IT, and expertise that's behind that. I just was curious, do you care to comment on how they did that and what you've seen, from your own company to kind of change that story and evolve?
When I came to Cisco, we knew we had a little bit of a credibility challenge there. I had mentioned that even at my old company, there were times that we would do a bake-off or a proof of value with a customer, and either Cisco didn't come up or was not a worry if they did. So one of the things that we've really been doubling down on is that credibility. All security practitioners are trust but verify type of people, and word of mouth or proof of solution is a huge piece. But one of the things that I think Cisco is doing a little bit differently is being very specific about letting you know our strategy of why we're doing this, how we're doing this, why we think this transformation is needed, and also giving ourselves the credit to say, this isn't our first rodeo. We've been in the IT business innovating for a long time. There were no networking technologies when Cisco started the WAN networking technology. There were no collaboration tools besides WebEx for a very long time, or at least none worth their weight. But Cisco has a very good backbone in understanding how to deliver real transformation, innovation, quality, and security. And right now, between a combination of looking at the real needs of our customers and of organizations that may not be customers yet, but we hope will join us in their cybersecurity journey, proving to them that our strategy is about how we help them defend their organization. We have practitioners building products. I know what it's like to have a security operations mission behind me, and needing to stand up to your board and say that I'm confident that we're going to be able to defend and protect ourselves, or if we're attacked, to handle it. That is meaningful, and we hope more people take notice of that from a credibility perspective, and at least give us the opportunity to prove out that our products can deliver on the outcomes that organizations are looking for.
Where can listeners learn more about Cisco XDR cybersecurity or about you?
Yeah, thank you so much. So they can go to cisco.com. We have a cisco.com XDR page where you can get a lot of information. You can see a click-through demo without having to contact anybody. I get it. As a customer, you don't always want to have someone calling you back, so you can get some hands-on access. And for me, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn at any point in time. I always try to post the events that I'm going to be speaking at as well, and would love to interact or hear more from peers in the industry.
Extended detection and response is the brain of the cybersecurity nervous system. It's the hub that analyzes disparate threat information across an organization's security environment. This holistic approach improves threat detection by reducing data silos, enables faster identification and response to incidents, and minimizes potential damage during a threat, all of which helps security teams focus on the most critical issues. A big thank you to Brianna Farro for sharing her insights and expertise. Until next time, keep innovating and stay ahead of the curve. For Innovation Heroes and SHI, I'm Ed McNamara, and I'll see you again in 2 weeks.
This episode is brought to you by Cisco, your partner in AI-guided cybersecurity. Cisco XDR improves your security efficacy and lets you do more with less. It detects advanced threats faster, automates responses, and prioritizes your most critical security alerts. Learn more at www.shi.com/Cisco.